Welcome to Recovery Report Live. I'm Daniel Odess, CEO and founder of GlobalPro. And we had a heck of a special report for you guys today because of the extreme impacts this hurricane season has had on Florida. We have a lot to talk about and to go through, and the reason why we are your source for insurance information you can use is because we've managed more than $1 billion in loss and recovery for thousands of homeowners, community associations, and business owners for more than a decade. We have been on the front lines helping and supporting our communities recover from mass loss and damage. Whether it's a pipe break, a fire, a hurricane, tornadoes, we have helped our communities rebound from these things. And it really starts out with giving back to the community, and right now a huge focus on life and safety and making sure our first responders can get into the area and help those that have suffered at the hands of Hurricane Milton. Now, not too long ago, we were talking about Hurricane Helene, and many parts of the United States right now are still suffering from the impacts of that massive storm. Not only the loss of life, but buildings, structures, businesses, homes. So much was lost during that storm, and then to be compounded and hit again by such a massive storm like this, it's important that you have the information you can use, and we want to focus on the recovery efforts now. And recovery takes on many different meanings. A lot of times people think that it's just putting back the sticks and bricks, but it really does. It's not about that. That's the rebuilding. That comes after you start to recover. We want to make sure that you understand this distinction. We're going to cover all of that in today's episode right here on the Recovery Report Live. And I'm joined by a very special guest, very own Bryan Gorrita. Thank you so much, man, for joining us here today.
Thank you, Dan. Appreciate it.
I appreciate you taking the time to be a part of this. And the reason why I bring you on, Bryan, is you have been such a pillar with regards to the real estate and the community and reporting on things that are impacting us as a community, whether it's decisions by the government, by developers and builders, or the economy and how those things are impacted. I think it'd be great to have a conversation with you about not only obviously the most relevant and obvious things with regards to the loss of life and the issues that are going on there and the health, life, and safety of our communities, but also down the road, what does this look like? What is it going to be? And I know you got a bunch of questions lined up for me, and I know we'll get into those right away. So, but let's start out talking just about the general impacts of the storms themselves. And I say storms, not just Milton, obviously. I want to talk about Helene compounded by Milton, and what you see on the real estate side as far as what's coming out of the community and how do you think that the local and state and federal governments have responded to these natural disasters and supporting our communities so far?
Well, I have to say that I think they've done a pretty good job. I mean, for this specific storm, they've been reporting on all different angles. They've been telling people to shelter. If they're not looking to leave, they had to leave. They've been really proactive, and I think the government's done a really great job. And it kind of shows because you can see what's going on right now with Milton. The storm has done a lot of significant damage, but I feel like the residents here in Florida were more prepared than other parts of the country, as we'll get into later. But I think overall here in Florida, we did a pretty good job. I'm curious to see how Tampa is holding up. I haven't been able to take a look at the footage because a lot of people were concerned about the surge. And I actually want to see what's going on with the hospital there because they did they built like a seawall, like a barricade around the hospital.
The flood barrier.
The flood barrier, exactly.
Yeah.
So I want to see how that held up. And that could be something that maybe we implement here in Miami-Dade County as well. And I think that would be beneficial for everybody.
Yeah, I think there was, in fact, the silver lining is from early reportings is that the storm wasn't as bad as anticipated, which not always the case. Hurricane Michael in the Panhandle was predicted to be far less than it ultimately ended. It spun up and then later it was first reported as a Category 4, which was a shock to a lot of people. And then a long time after, about a year later, they upgraded it to a Category 5 based on evidence that they found. So I think the difference here is that they were still showing it as a Category 3, but we weren't quite seeing the wind speeds that you would expect in a Category 3 storm. Not to say that it wasn't severe, but I would say that it definitely wasn't as bad as expected. However, definitely an extreme amount. And I definitely agree with you. I think that the local, state, response to the storm ahead of it was incredible. There's definitely a sense of community on both, again, the local level as well as the state level, and working together and coordinating a lot of the efforts that were needed. So I think that we saw a lot of positivity and things going into this, getting a lot of people out. Hopefully, and what we're starting to see, we are definitely seeing some rescues that are going on right now. High water rescues is what they call them. Again, these first responders are putting their life on the line to help those that, quite frankly, a lot of times didn't heed warning. However, I mean, did you see the damage to that stadium where all the first responders were? In the middle of the storm, they had to evacuate.
Yeah, that's crazy. I didn't think it was going to rip that apart like it did, and they got lucky that, I think from when I was reading the reports, it could have been a lot worse. It could have been more of a direct impact. But yeah, it destroyed it. I just saw it this morning.
Yeah, there was a lot of shearing. In fact, the Weather Channel, which I was glued to, like many of us out there, was reporting that there was a lot of shearing, and this was looked somewhat like a nor'eastern storm, and it almost like as if like the bottom of the eye wall just disappeared. But however, we're seeing from our own clientele tremendous amount of flooding and damage in Naples area and north. So still the impacts as it was moving on shore that one would expect in those things. But I definitely think, though, that, again, not as bad as we expected, but still pretty severe circumstances, especially because it was like that 1-2 punch. You first had Helene come through. A lot of concern over those debris piles and shifting things that were going on there. So, it was interesting to see the state's response to that, just kind of coming in and trying to hoard this stuff and push it and isolate things. But I think an outlier and an unexpected issue was the severity of the tornadoes and the immediate loss of life that we saw, at least 4 deaths reported. And those were on the East Coast, I would call it, of Florida. Not so much on the West Coast, but again, there was some on the West Coast as well. But last I saw was 38 reported sightings of tornadoes. Again, those numbers, those are early. One of the other fishy early things, or not so fishy, but like kind of wishy-washy, was the projecting on physical loss and damage. As an insured advocate, somewhat highly critical of insurance companies and the industry. We did see some interesting reporting on projections and loss and damage as it relates to physical damages, $200 billion. I have correlated a lot of these blown out of proportion projections on physical damage losses. Shortly thereafter, you see some crazy legislation being proposed, and then sometimes these legislators don't have the updated numbers on these things, and they find themselves reporting on these things later on, even though it's not correct. So I'm a little bit concerned, Brian, I will admit, as to where this all goes from here, because we had such extreme reporting, and that's why I was talking about that just a minute ago, and then what to expect down the road. I'll be honest with you, 7:55 p.m., the entire insurance industry received, or as I believe they received, an email from the Department of Financial Services with an emergency order, and I have it right here in front of me. What it says: important information for adjusters, emergency rule 69 BER 24-4. There's articles that have come out that said this is directly in response to the fraud that allegedly is committed by insurance companies, not the policyholder advocates, not the lawyers, right? Not that stuff, but insurance companies, directly in response to the fraud that allegedly insurance companies were committing by adjusting financial numbers, estimated costs of damages. Interesting stuff. 7:55 p.m. Think about where you were when this emergency order was filed by the Department of Financial Services, effective October 9th, 2024. Definitely something worth talking about here. It talks about code of ethics, talks about edits. I mean, Brian, what do you make of this?
So my biggest thing is that I guess there's a perception that hurricane hit Miami. That Miami's the fraud capital and scam capital of the world. So people will be going on the roofs, probably tearing apart the roof even more. My question is this: how much does fraud actually play into the insurance space? Because there's that perception that the insurance business, more so for, to file a claim, is like it's like a scam. Most people don't really understand it. They're very concerned about it. Why do people have that perception, and do you think that's even like justified?
Yeah, it's interesting. If you, as a licensed adjuster as well as a licensed insurance agent, I receive lots of information from the department, as well as from industries, both on the policyholder side as well as the company side. Really interesting is that if you actually do go review the Department of Financial Services reports on fraud, whether they're allegations or administrative rulings on it, where they actually administer punishments, whether it's suspensions of licensing, sometimes jail time, sometimes just like a slap on the wrist, like a small fine, whatever it may be. Most of those reports, from what I have seen historically, are related to insurance agents, things that insurance agents are doing, whether it's issues of premiums that they've collected and not bound policies, et cetera, et cetera. There's all kinds of different things, marketing tactics, things that they've done. And even that is not really related to property. It's mostly has to do with other lines of coverage, whether it's medical or auto or other things that we see not property related, where we see a lot of pain as it relates to legislative actions to raise rates and changes, and things that we talk about when it comes to hurricanes specifically. So, I can say that over the years, you don't see, and I think that's where this is really important and something for me to like kind of like sat back and was like, wow, finally. You don't see, and you see a lot of APIA, PIA. I would encourage you all to go check out their Instagram feed and their website. It's an advocacy group that has been pouring a lot of resources investigating fraud and bad actors within the insurance company side of things. They've started going to town hall meetings and doing other stuff. And when you look at some of their early reportings and things like that, they'll talk about how the state historically has not spent or invested as much resources investigating fraud committed by insurance companies, despite going back to Ian, where you had the reports of changes in reports and some underwriting standards that were not being followed, and things to recent class action lawsuits where insurance companies were changing or using price databases that they knew were for new construction, not for mitigation or reconstruction, resulting in substantial underpayment, edited reports. You have independent adjusters coming out on behalf of insurance companies who are getting calls from policyholders that were screaming about, and literally one of them, actually in the 60 Minutes report, if you haven't seen it, go check it out, talks about death threats from homeowners, and it was shocked, was like, well, what are you talking about? I submitted an estimate that included those things, and one of them showed a $200,000+ estimate submitted, and a $15,000 payment came out on the other side. I mean, huge changes things. So, and APIA came out and said, look, there hasn't been that much focus or emphasis in financial investment in investigating those things, whereas you see on the insured and the insured side, on the policyholder advocate side, you saw much more emphasis and focus on it, leading to all of this anti-consumer legislation that we've seen passed over the last couple of years. One thing I want to bring up is, and I can see you want to say something real quick, but one thing I want to bring up is also an important thing is the litigation statistics that were being used as a basis for this anti-consumer legislation, how they've called into question all that stuff suddenly. The late reporting by citizens as it relates to their numbers on these things. Many insurance companies didn't even report their numbers. They got slapped with like a $15,000 fine. I mean, come on. These companies are pulling down $15 billion. I mean, and a $15,000 fine means nothing. So, and they still haven't reported on these things yet they proffer it as the crux of the issue. Meanwhile, they're reporting record profits and things like it's like to use a kind of fun word like fugazi, like this, like funny stats or statistics, which as on the insurance advocacy side, we've been like kind of like, where's this coming from?
So there's a common idea amongst a lot of people that when they try to get their insurance, all right, when they try to actually use it, it's never there for them. And for people who live, let's say, for example, in a condo, and right now this storm just hit us, it may have destroyed maybe the roof or the pool or amenities or whatever it is. How can I, as a condo board member or a business owner, how can I tell that a firm like you knows what they're doing, that's going to file the actual policy? Because right now I'm assuming that there's going to be a bunch of people coming down there to try to, file claims, and what because that could also come into the fraud aspect. So how do I know that the person that I'm going to hire is going to be the one that's going to do the job right, that's going to get me the most amount of money, and at the end of the day, I feel that I'm going to be made whole if I go with this person?
It's also a component of time, getting it done sooner rather than later, right? And there's several components to the timing aspect of it. The way in which you report the claim, a lot of people immediately report it, which quite frankly is not what the policies require of it. We advocate and talk about how it's prompt reporting, right? It's not immediate reporting. The reality of it is that by calling your insurance agent or your insurance company while you're away evacuated because you saw your home on a video feed from either social media or the news is not a proper way of dealing or managing or handling these things. And just because you called first doesn't mean you're getting front of line service. In fact, I can tell you that of the hundreds of people that we have been assisting with Hurricane Helene, many of the insurance company adjusters have not even come to the property, despite many of those policyholders reporting that they called their agent or the insurance company directly immediately following the storm. The reality of it is the insurance companies do not have enough adjusters to manage storms of this size, particularly when they affect such a massive geographic area. They just don't have the resources for it. And there's stricter laws around independent adjusters, those that are representing insurance companies, coming in, flying in, they call them stormtroopers, troopering in and just running all over the place. The reality is they want to collect as many files as they can as fast as they possibly can, and then strategically lay it out so they can hit as many, because the more they hit, the more money they make. Okay, so just because you lost your home doesn't necessarily mean that you're going to get front of line service, and just because you called first doesn't mean that. Now, as far as it relates to hiring a firm like ours and knowing that hiring someone is in your best interest, look, the reality of it is that insurance is more complicated today than ever before. There's more exclusions, limitations, complicated language around deductibles. Right now, you have a situation where you had Helene, then you had Milton. How do the policy deductibles interact, or how are they managed? There's what's called a calendar deductible issue. There's some misinformation out there about the calendar deductible issues. As you exhausted, you don't have a deductible. That's not true. You then go to the all other peril deductible. Some other things and nuances that you as a policyholder are quite simply not going to know. And a firm like ours, who's managed thousands, tens of thousands of claims throughout the entire country, in many different markets and areas like here in Florida, where you see substantial damage caused by this natural disaster, we see this stuff on a volume basis, which gives us kind of an insight as to what's going on and what to expect as we move from one property to the next. Whereas you're not going to know that information as you're focused in on your own loss and damage. And some of the information you may be receiving from other homeowners or business owners, community associations, as we have learned, may not be entirely correct, because you don't know if that board member or unit owner actually is attending all of the meetings. Sometimes these association boards hold closed-door meetings, emergency meetings that not all the board members get on, so misinformation gets out there. We have an understanding of all of the things that are going on. Also, we're licensed in many things other than just adjusting. Like myself, I'm licensed as a general contractor, insurance agent. You could be lawyers. You could be other types of contractors, mechanical, roofing. You can have many other skill sets and experiences and other types of businesses, whether it's financial, like Matt Sangsterin, our president of Florida, spent years in Wall Street doing analytics and analyzing financials, and so we can help and support business owners as they're analyzing their income losses and going through these motions, and whether or not your type of loss triggers that type of coverage. If you're in the manufacturing business or you're storing equipment or product in an industrial space, there's so many nuances to stuff, Bryan. It's too much to even go over. And so when you hear when you hear the state of Florida's representatives or insurance company advocates state that allow your insurance company to do their work first. Now, I just went through many reasons why. Either it's going to be slow, delayed, and probably not in your best interest in almost any instance I've ever seen. These representatives for the insurance company that come out on behalf of the insurance company do your interest. Also, really important point, Brian, is that your agent is not a licensed adjuster. And even if they are, they sold you the policy, so they're not adjusting your claim. And if they're not representing the insurance company, have a contract with them to do that as an independent adjuster or a company adjuster, they're not there for you. They're not going to come out to your property. In fact, we just had a over the West Coast, I mean, huge properties, okay, said to us, hey guys, I think I'm going to see what the insurance company does. My agent told me he reported the claim and we're going to get policy limits. He said, well, did that property, are they slab claims? Did they wash away in the flood storm? He goes, no. And he goes, well, how are you going to get a slab? Had your broker been out there? He said, no. It's like, well, so no one's done an actual proper evaluation, but your broker is already telling you you're going to get policy limits based on some photographs he sent you? Yeah, that's what he told me. He's like, so but the duties obligations under a policy specifically state that you have to actually itemize your damaged and underdamaged portion of your loss most often, right? Definitely your damaged portion. Most often we see now in policies the undamaged portion as well. So who's doing the cataloging of these damages, as well as with regards to content losses and damages, and dealing with NFIP and flood is so complicated. There's such specific things that they won't. The allegations of rampant fraud on the insurance company side, it calls into question how you can rely on anyone on that side of the coin. And then we talk about why we're in the situation where we are right now with anti-consumer legislation, higher insurance rates, shrinkflation is what they're calling it, shrinkflation, right? Shrinkflation meaning you're paying more for less coverage. Everyone thinks that, oh my God, I got a flat renewal, that's great. Yeah, but did you look at what they may have added to the policy? Because you might not have actually gotten what you had purchased the year before, and in most instances we find it's not the case.
Wow, you dropped a nuke of information.
Yeah.
Well, then now this leads into another thing that I've been hearing a lot, that if a hurricane were to hit Florida, just one, and this is what I heard from the state, that citizens wouldn't be able to cover. They would run out of money and they'll run out of funds. Is that even true? Does that even hold weight, or is that just BS?
Well, as we, the only thing you look at is the history, and insurance all relies on historical reference, right? It's all about, even the, well, let me say, it should be, it typically, and most often has been, about historical impacts that we rely on for decision making, whether it's in legislation, policy changes, things like that. Unfortunately, there has been some approval on forward-looking modeling, which is very interesting. So a whole nother issue and nuance to dive into a little bit on another broadcast. Nothing, because I just nuked everyone with all this information. I don't want to get too heavy on nuances of insurance, but I can certainly spend hours talking about that alone. The reality of it is that historically, the last time we saw something that I can point to that may be relevant is Katrina Wilma in Florida, and a cat fund that was set up, and then it was not only taxed on it through various other means, but it was also included in the policies as an additional cost on any policy sold in Florida. They added this fund to subsidize citizens in the state of Florida for claims, future claims, and whatever it is. So, can it run out of money? Well, I mean, yeah, of course. Just like FEMA was running out of money, federal government, right? Not to get into that controversy as to where that money was being spent and what it's being spent on, and confusing statements made by press secretaries and things of that nature. But and that's not a political statement. I'm simply looking at it from an insurance and recovery standpoint, and I can tell you that even as an expert on recovery and insurance, it was very confusing messaging, and we had to kind of navigate through that stuff because there was confusing information on the federal level. And as it relates on the state level, I do think that there is some concern, but there's what's called reinsurance, right? and reinsurance is insurance for insurance. So we'll see how well that reinsurance reacts, but I will tell you that there has been historically fights amongst insurance companies and reinsurance companies as to their entitlements and liabilities and limits and whatnot. The reinsurance market was pretty tapped. There's another kind of rabbit hole we can go down as to who's controlling most of the reinsurance and what that means and why it's offshore or outside of our country and how does that all get rated and then what does that all mean to us? That's another fun little nuance and interesting thing to go through. So there's a lot to unpack there, but I don't think that should be the concern right now. I think the concern for our policyholders, we had a little bit of a technical thing here. I think what the concern for our insureds in the state of Florida and what they should be focused on right now is recovering, focusing on community, assisting in any way they can with policyholders and their local communities, their community centers, giving back, charity, making sure you're giving prompt notice to your claim, making sure you're documenting things. We're back here with the broadcast. Oh, actually, it looks like it froze, so it wasn't us.
Oh, okay.
The reality of it is that it's important that people have a better understanding that if they're not looking out for their best interest and documenting things, taking pictures. Now, this isn't for social media, okay? We're talking about claims. So don't just take one picture of one angle. Take pictures of every single angle. If you can, and it's safe, either you or a licensed contractor who has proper ladders and access to take pictures of your roof, fly a drone. Many people have consumer drones these days. Get it up, take pictures of things. Do whatever you can to document the condition of your property. It looks like our weather report is back. And do those things, but also look, make sure your neighbor's okay. Focus on those things. There will be time and a place to worry about whether or not the state of Florida has enough money or Citizens has enough money or your private insurer has enough money. And if they go out of business, then there's FIGA. And then that's the Florida Insurance Guarantee Association. Again, that's another tax on all of us as, stakeholders in Florida, and how all that gets distributed and managed. And there's some controversy around that and where that money went and why those insurance companies were actually subject to FIGA. Some should have been, some should be. There's a lot to, again, another rabbit hole and issues that we see with the mismanagement of some of this stuff. But again, the focus should be on your health, life, and safety and your community. That's the second level. The next level of that is making sure that you've documented your damages. Don't attach fancy adjectives to them. It's not as bad as my neighbor. This is your loss. Focus on your damages and your loss and damages when you get to that phase of these things. And again, prompt notice, not immediate notice. Again, because health, life, and safety, to help your community recover. The faster we can help our communities recover, the faster we can get material supplies and labor into the area to help with the rebuilding efforts. The difference between recovering an insurance and rebuilding is that we want to recover the money we're entitled to before we start to rebuild. Recover the money you're entitled to means, though, that you need to start mitigation efforts. Doesn't mean necessarily you need to put back the sticks and bricks that were damaged, but you need to stop your property from further damage. Okay, so tarp on the roof, board up windows, cut out wet drywall, rip out wet flooring, those things. Protect the property from further damage, then stop. Allow everyone to investigate your claims. Get through the property. Take pictures, whether it's the adjusters or the engineers. Again, because of the rampant fraud on behalf of the insurance companies that's been alleged by so many that work for them, as well as so many other policy holders, if you're a community association manager, board member, or a business owner that has other stakeholders, you are a fiduciary. How is it that you are not represented by a licensed public adjuster right now in your claim is baffling to me. How you think you can protect the financial interest of your association and do what's in their best interest, given all of these other factors and information. And I encourage everyone to go to our website, globalpro.com. We just put out an article about all of this stuff, top 5 takeaways, and we broke it down pretty simple, straightforward. And make an argument and an issue, make an argument about an issue regarding the fiduciary obligations of community association board members, as well as business owners and stakeholders within them, and not having a licensed public adjuster. And I know, Bryan, from watching your broadcast on Instagram and various other places, that you've investigated these fiduciary obligations of community associations, right?
Yeah, a lot of them, and I'm concerned for a lot of these older condos that right now they're already going through their current assessments, and then, God only knows after this hurricane, even though they may not have been hit, what are the chances, Dan, of their insurance premiums going up because of this storm? Is that a possibility?
I would say that it's on the table. I don't know that it's directly related to this loss, this hurricane. I would argue that they were already pushing for rate increases. So, but again, why?
Yeah.
Okay, is the asterisk, and I think I've covered that exhaustively today for enough. But certainly this is going to become a building block for legislative initiatives to push for higher rate increases, and I do think that this is going to certainly fuel that conversation, because it's already started.
Oh, 100%. And I think that for a lot of these condo owners or these property owners in the state, I feel bad for them, man, because this is tough. Whenever there's disaster, there's so much. Look at that thing.
It's still on shore.
Like, look at the bands are still there.
Yep.
So I'm curious to see how Tampa holds up. I want to take a look at those videos. I mean, insurance is one of those things that we all need it, but I hope that people contact individuals like yourself so they can actually get the money instead of just paying and then they never see the money.
It's a tough time for all of us in the state of Florida, as well as throughout the impact areas of Helene, Carolinas. I mean, they were literally still searching for people, and it's a dire situation. We're doing everything we can here, both by obviously representing policyholders in their disasters and their loss and damage, but more than that, the community effort. GlobalPro Cares Foundation, we've been doing a drive here, and you can check it out online. I encourage everyone to check our website, globalpro.com, or go to our Instagram page, and you'll see lots of information there. There's links to an Amazon link, a store that we created for things that you can buy for victims of both Helene as well as Milton and other disasters. We are always on the front line. If you go on our website and you do look at the various things that the services we provide, the Griffin blog, the clients, and you go to the About section under the GlobalPro Cares, I'm clicking on it right here, it talks about all the things that we've been doing on the front lines to encourage people to do the same. We're not doing this to show off, but we want to give people ideas of ways in which they can give back to the community. So whether it's creating this Amazon link to items that victims would need in order to recover, or stopping by our location if you happen to be in the South Florida market, come on by, drop things off. We have a whole sorting area down there. If you buy the things on Amazon with our link, it gets sorted and it will get to the front lines. We can guarantee that. We are on the front lines. Our team has been dispersed all over. And I say all over, I'm not even say Florida, but like literally all over, assisting as best we can. But again, right now, health, life, and safety, community comes first. While we do have, clients and, whether existing or new clients contacting us to assist them with their claims, we're doing a massive push, the same as all of you should be doing out there. We really want your help. We want everyone to focus on the community aspect of it as much as they can, particularly if you're not in the immediately impacted areas. Do your part, give back. But again, obviously check where you're giving that money and how you're giving it and making sure that it's actually going to the victims. There's a lot of fraud, unfortunately, associated with just charitable giving. It's disgusting. I think it's absolutely disgusting. People deserve to go to jail for doing it. I don't understand it, and I don't even want to even try to understand it, how desperate some people get, that they want to take advantage of situations like this. So be very careful with it. Make sure it's going to organizations like ours that actually do get onto the front lines, do give it back, making sure that those in need most certainly get what they need. We can't do it all, but we're going to do our part, and we know we're making an impact because we've seen it. I've literally walked cases of water into people's homes. We were doing a lot of it after Michael and some of the hard-hit areas that are pretty remote in the fishing villages, stuff like that. It's the same situation here. Whether it's batteries, whether it's, I'll be honest, one of the things that we don't see a lot of people give, which I think there's been more and more news coverage on, is baby products, infant products, whether it's formula, diapers, things like that. That stuff is expensive, and I know this because I have 2 children. And if things were tough before the storm, they are excruciatingly tough now, because unfortunately the insurance claim process is long, even if you have coverage. So be mindful of these things, do your part, and give back.
Dan, I'm glad that you guys are doing that and giving back to the community. I mean, this storm's going to be, it's devastating. Look at that. The whole entire dome is gone. Yeah. So, God only knows. And
you see all the green on the left, those are the beds that the first responders were supposed to be sleeping in overnight, getting rest so that they can respond the next day. So again, the resources that were allocated to this storm, to Milton specifically, and to continue the recovery efforts from Helene, are exhausted in the idea that they've been up all night, where they were supposed to, be on, they do this stuff in shifts. And this was an opportunity for them to, those that were going to be there, to get some rest. And unfortunately, as we can see right there behind us, Brian, is that, our first responders are going to be, it's exhausting. It takes that second wind, the third wind, the fourth wind, the fifth wind, to do those things. And when you have people that don't evacuate, and that's the most frustrating thing to watch, you end up in situations like these. So let's be mindful of these things, do our part, make sure you're taking care of yourself too. Yeah. I see a lot of people just absolutely wear themselves thin trying to help, and then think that they're not as bad off, and then they wear themselves out, and then again they're at their worst. And right now we need to be at our best to try to help those that were in the path of Helene and Milton as much as we possibly can.
Yeah, this is gonna be something that I think that the state of Florida has to come back to the table. They're gonna have to look at this. I talk about the condo because that's something that I've been tracking, the condo crisis going on here. But I know a lot of people think that the state is gonna push back, their mandates. But I don't think after this storm they're gonna push anything back. I think they're gonna go full steam on it.
No, and they have to. You had a cooling of the market. People were reporting on the residential, side over in those areas. Punta Gorda, from what I understand, was like ground zero for the last recession, 2008, 2010. Look, you had this like massive increase in population in these impacted areas over the last couple years since COVID. Not a lot of people, all these newcomers may not be used to this, and these nuances and evacuated and watched from afar. So whatever we can do to help, Brian, that's what we're here to do. And I really appreciate you coming on today.
Thank you, Dan.
This is an awesome broadcast. I love talking with you about these things to make sure people get the information that they can use.
Yeah, knowledge is power. At the end of the day, when a disaster strikes, you need to know what you can do. So
yeah, not a good situation. But again, over a decade of doing this stuff on the front lines. If we can help anyone out there, check us out, globalpro.com. 855-487-7475 is toll-free number. But we do have local offices, whether it's Naples, Tampa, Central Florida, North Florida, Texas, New York. There's offices spread out. Our personnel is spread out, helping those in need. So if we can do anything to help you further, please let us know. And if you haven't already, like us and subscribe to all of our social media channels. Check us out on YouTube, Instagram, X, Facebook. We're on every one of the social media channels to make sure you're getting the information you use. And join us next week, same time, same place, right here on the Recovery Report Live.